Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our team discussion for November. Today, we will be talking about what we learned in 2021 and what that means for 2022. But first, I'd like to introduce a new team member to Employers Advantage, HR business partner, Mary Block. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
We're so happy you joined us. So let's jump right in. Team, what did we learn in 2021? What were the major takeaways?
Anybody?
Yes, since I will go first, since I'm the newest member of the team. Again, thank you all for joining us in this discussion today, and thank you for being here. And thanks again for Employers Advantage for having me as a member of the team. In my opinion, I believe that we've learned that we are stronger than we think, and that we can prepare and adjust and maneuver without little to no advance notice. The pandemic hit us all as a nation instantaneously. We were not prepared. We did not know what direction the pandemic was going to take us in, and there was panic across the globe. With so many unknowns, so many questions, even the most educated medical personnel could not answer. We were all frightened on what's to come, what's going to happen to our businesses, our personal lives, our families, near and far, etc. It did not take long for us to realize, in my opinion, that we are stronger than what we assumed in the past. It did not take very long once we realized the pandemic was much bigger than anticipated to implement processes, making sure that we're in compliance with the CDC guidelines, so that way we could remain in business as we move forward as much as we feasibly can. And so that's the biggest takeaway that I believe we've learned from the pandemic. We were not prepared. This was very sudden, very panic and stressful for all of us. And it's still a level of panic and stress. But we at least have some guidelines in place. Those guidelines will continue to be adjusted and edited as the pandemic moves forward. But that's the biggest takeaway, is that we are more prepared than we initially thought in a moment of crisis for the nation.
I think to tag on to what Mary just said, because in addition to that, we witnessed real time how policies can impact an employer same day, and can impact how the employer operates, how they pay the employee, how they treat the employee, how they hire, how they terminate. So not only were we caught off guard and we had to prove that we were stronger than we had anticipated, and that we're resilient, but in doing so, we had to be equipped to familiarize ourselves with laws and regulations that were changing minute to minute that directly impacted every employer, from someone who employed one person to 1,000. So marrying the two, which is, I think, kind of where we came in. That surprised me. I had not, having to react so quickly to legislation was challenging.
Yeah. I think having to kind of make those reactions on the fly like that too increased our flexibility inside of our organizations significantly more than it has been in the past, because a lot of us planners were used to making plans and then working towards those plans and following through those plans. And for the last year, a lot of us that are normal planners have really been flying by the seat of our pants. And in some cases, it's worked out really well. So I think that's something going into 2022 that we can capitalize on for those of us who aren't used to doing that.
Yeah, I think it also really redefined what flexibility means in the workplace. I think we have a brand new definition, really. We used to just think remote work was being flexible, but now there are all sorts of variables that really define that for an employee and force the employer to evaluate, well, how flexible am I really being in evaluating the needs of my business, but also evaluating the needs of each employee so that I can retain them long term.
All right, well, speaking of 2022, do you feel that the mandated vaccine in 2022 will help with compliance? Do you feel that having more rules and regulations put in place, it'll be easier for companies to enact policies?
Oof.
Yeah.
That's our answer to that. Oof.
Oof.
I can't say easier.
No.
But I think because we have gotten used to, for lack of a better phrase, flying by the seat of our pants and just kind of taking the information and figuring out what to do with it quickly. I mean, we're just kind of becoming more accustomed to conducting business that way. I don't think it's going to be easier, though. The nuances of each law and all the variables and the pieces of the puzzle are really complex. So we will have to continue to spend a lot of time and focus figuring out those components and how to best service each business as an HR partner, how to service that business best in support of those laws.
I would also hope to see that, not necessarily related to any mandates or anything, but in general, I think that a lot of the federal regulations are so antiquated to how we actually work and how people work and function, that if you see, like, they were able to roll out all this legislation related to COVID essentially overnight and on an ongoing basis, I feel like it might be a little bit easier to change some of these other regulations to be more in line with how people work, in the 21st century. So maybe that's something that would be easier and more helpful.
So how has the move from in-office work to mostly remote work changed HR responsibilities, would you say?
These are good questions, Megan.
Well, I
Hard
think,
on them.
I think from with that regard, I mean, if anything, there's little tangible ways in which it's changed. The policies that we write, the type of policies that we write, the handbook, what the handbook looks like, recruiting. I mean, recruiting's a whole different can of worms now. It's hard for other reasons, but now we have this extra layer, and it's even more challenging for employers who can't offer remote work. So I think it's in very tangible ways. There are small impacts it's had on my day-to-day. The fact that employees can work remote now, if anything, just from a policy and recruiting perspective.
So do you think that 2021, the theme of 2021 was change? Just throwing that out there. I mean, do you feel like there's a,
Yeah, some of it. And then going back to what Candace was talking about flexibility, like we've learned that people want and need to work differently than they have before. And flexibility pre-pandemic is not the same as flexibility post-pandemic or now or whatever phase of pandemic that we're in. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. Like, I think, well, Megan and I were talking about this earlier because I was telling her a story where there was somebody saying that he just couldn't believe that the employee when they were or the candidate when they were interviewing was like, well, here's my schedule and my availability. He was just completely, taken aback that a candidate would dictate their schedule to him versus him being dictating the schedule to the employee, which to me, I thought, well, then if they can work that schedule, take it, and they're the right. And then if you need more, then let's find somebody who can work the other schedule. So anyway, I don't know. I think that for sure in 2021, we continued to learn things that we learned in 2020, such as things don't happen, the way that they used to. They can't continue to happen the way that they used to. There needs to be a greater emphasis on flexibility and the support of each individual as humans in the workplace. And then we need to get some of these laws and regulations to catch up with all of that.
Since employee retention was a hot topic for 2021, do you feel that a good focus for employers is upskilling their current workforce when they can and promoting from within?
Always.
Sandra.
I was gonna say,
Absolutely. Yeah.
always.
That's a
It should
Sandra
be
question.
something that should be done regardless of pandemic status. I think this is a great time to remind businesses that they have great talent that they have already invested in. And a lot of times your return on investment is going to be higher with your internals, getting them upskilled. So if somebody doesn't have the experience you're looking for, but they meet all of the other qualifications, you know they come to work, you know they do really well in their other jobs. I mean, spend the extra time, spend the extra investment, upskill them, and look at refilling those outside positions at lower levels. It just makes sense.
And do you also think when it comes to employees, employer offered wellness benefits such as an EAP, is that more important than ever? Having,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
And I've made it a point to go through with all of the clients that I have and just remind them if they don't have it, it's something that, you know, we can offer to them, because I just think now more than ever, that's something that's come to light, and something that more people are realizing is just their mental health, and just what all of this has had an impact on them and how it's trickling down and affecting their work. And just making sure that employees know that they have that tool available to them can make such a big difference.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. And with Ellen, I'll just piggyback off what you were saying too. And I think we all kind of chimed in the beginning of the question. That's so important for the different wellness benefits. And typically wellness benefits are talked about very heavily during the onboarding process, and maybe not as much as the employee continues their tenure with the company. And so again, it's important to make sure that we're speaking with those employees, just reminding those employees that those resources are available, because the pandemic has changed. But pre-pandemic, there were still life balances and different stressors within individuals and families that needed to be addressed. And so the pandemic just added additional stressors to that. So I agree, it's important for us to make sure that we remind the clients and their employees that they do have these resources available for them during the year, et cetera.
I also think that that kind of connects back to working remote and how things look different when individuals are working remote now. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we have lost that maybe ability to check in with someone's well-being remote. So I can very much come across as something I'm not on this computer screen for 1 hour a day, and then be suffering from, spiraling outside of that hour on this computer. And because I'm not in an office interacting with people, you might miss some of those cues. So I think that's something also to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I agree.
We
I
don't
think
know what everybody's home life is like.
No.
I'm sorry, Candace, I don't know if that's what you were getting ready to say, but that's one of the key components, is we don't know what they're dealing with at home. And not being able to have that personal touch and that one-on-one time with that individual each day, then we could lose sight of those. So having a resource for them to be able to confidentially reach out to is a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, and I think all of us have now begun coaching our managers, if we're dealing with people leaders, to ask that question more directly. If you're having one-on-one still, even if they're on the phone or if they're over Zoom, are you asking directly, how's the rest of this employee's life? To give them an opportunity to create a safe zone so that they can speak up if there's an issue. Because really wellness, employee wellness has become a business priority. In an environment like this, where it's easy to lose an employee because they can go to a different position, transition easily, you have to look for ways to retain them, and showing empathy, expressing concern for their overall wellness is a retention strategy, even for small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know as an employee myself, I enjoy a good company culture. Do you think a main focus for HR and for employers should be still company culture? And can this be handled virtually efficiently?
I think so. And I think we do a great job, like our coffee breaks, taking the time to realize that, just for the reasons that you guys mentioned before, that employee not really knowing their work, their homework situation, their personal situation, being able to connect those few minutes where you probably would have done that in an office huddling at some point and don't have that. So you could do those types of things to just make people feel that connection. I worked in a different environment before that was very similar to our setup, and it was before COVID, but I can see it continuing. And we used to just work and schedule to work together on a Zoom. Just the other person typing along and working on the project, and we're just sort of talking back and forth. It just sort of give you that feeling when you're remote, that you're still sitting next to someone, or you can ask questions and feel like, you know, you're having some part of collaboration, if you will. So I think it's important, and there's so many small things that you can do, just like the things that we've done with the coffee breaks and so many other examples.
I mean, you guys stick around for the jokes, right?
We do, 100%. We expect good ones and new ones. Shannon loves them. She looks forward to them every week.
Look her up on LinkedIn. Send her your favorite joke. She'll enjoy it. Smash that like button.
Well, on Sandra's walk, in Sandra's neighborhood, somebody physically goes outside every day and writes a dad joke of the day and has it sitting on a bench. So she can share that with you, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
I'd move. No.
The interesting thing about the culture is when the pandemic kind of first hit and people were going from in-office to remote, we did get a lot of questions about how do I keep up the culture remotely? They were very, very concerned about maintaining the culture remotely. And some people didn't even address it because they just kind of assumed it would carry on. They may have had a strong culture before and they thought it would carry on, and it didn't. So it's really up to the leader or leaders of the organization to be intentional about I always say over communicating in a remote environment is required to maintain the culture. So we got to keep doing that.
Yeah, it's very, very important. Does anyone else have any other tips regarding that? If there's anything else, I mean, we talked about EAP, checking in.
You know, this is something that's not talked about often, but there are people who don't want to work from home or can't work from home or can't function well from home and would rather be somewhere else. And so thinking about how to identify those people and accommodating them if possible, and doing it in a safe way, in a safe and fair way, and maybe acknowledging why they struggle working from home and seeing if there's ways you can help remedy that if working on site permanently isn't an option. So there is the flip side. We assume most people want to work remote. That is certainly not always the case.
And there's those individuals too that can't work from home, right? The frontline workers who have to come in every day. And so while we're taking all of these strides to make sure that we're doing things for the folks who are working virtually, we can't put so much emphasis on that we lose sight of the people that are there with us every day, that's having to work on site. So I think there's a responsibility there too, to make sure that we're still taking care of the ones. I know that it's assumed we're taking care of them, but let's make sure that we're doing that for the ones who are coming in every day. It goes back to that equality, making sure that we're trying to treat everyone as best as we can in all circumstances, in all positions.
Mm-hmm. What else you got, Megan, in your bag of questions?
Oh, let's see. Well, mostly I just have, how did 2021 change the HR environment? We've talked about that. The theme of 2021 was change. And then how has or will the mandated COVID vaccine affect small businesses?
Oof.
Yeah. Sorry, oof. I've got a lot of oof today.
Oof, she did it again.
I did.
Oh, Shannon.
See?
Welcome.
She's coming over to the dark side.
Welcome.
Well
I hate
done.
myself for that. I hate myself for that. The mandate. Oof.
So one thing that I recently saw is that a silver lining in the vaccination mandate for large employers, the silver lining for small employers is that people are going to leave those large employers and now be available for the small employers. And so it's going to increase the candidate pool. So that's definitely something that I've that I have seen, or at least something that I have read as a possibility, as you know, as far as how that could affect small businesses in a positive way, depending on how you want to look at that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch and see how that plays out. I know a lot of people say, oh, if my employer, forces me to get a vaccine or what have you, I'm going to leave. But when push comes to shove and you have an alternative, it's not like it's a do or don't. There is an alternative of getting tested weekly outside of the vaccine. It'll be interesting to see if people really do start shifting because of that.
So Sandra, I have a question for you. In your recruiting, has anyone asked you if this employer is mandating the vaccine?
Yes.
Okay.
I have had several people ask if vaccines are mandated, and they usually follow up with, I'm happy to do testing, I'm happy to wear a mask and sit 6 feet apart and do all the other things, but I'm not interested in a vaccine. So yes, that is a real question.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting how recruiting has changed though? Because now you're posting jobs and you have to clarify, one, is it hybrid, remote, or on-site? You're having conversations about whether vaccines are required or not. I mean, those are so, it's stuff that we'd never really talked about.
Yeah,
They probably avoided. I never would ask someone in a phone screen about their medical vaccination status.
Yes.
I had
Feels
one
wrong.
candidate who was like, I'm just going to start our conversation before you ask me any questions. I'm letting you know I am leaving my current employer because they have a COVID vaccine policy. They're going to be mandating it. It's effective on this day. I am not getting vaccinated. I don't know why I have to share this medical information with you, but I am. She just went on for 10 minutes with a lot of personal, medical information. And it was a little surreal to have that conversation, but obviously, she's facing this issue at her current employer and doesn't want to get into another situation with another employer who may at some point either have to or may consider this type of policy. So it is something at the front of candidates' minds that they're talking about, even at initial screens.
Yeah. Well, when the federal government releases the pandemic designation, it will shift a lot of things. So we'll go back pre-pandemic as far as regulations and not being able to ask certain things. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out, because there's a federally recognized pandemic, it kind of relaxed some of the rules, and that's how they're able to do these emergency things. So anyway, we're getting off topic.
I was gonna say, do we know, for 2022, I mean, has anybody read anything or heard the outlooks on if that is something that will be considered at some certain point from a timeline perspective, or are we under the assumption that the classification of pandemic will go on for 2022? Crickets, nothing, everybody?
I haven't seen anything like that, but it would be interesting to know. I guess it's all based off COVID numbers and the science behind it. The emergency temporary standard, if it does go through, is only for 6 months. So they're those things aren't long term, but it would be interesting to see what's the point to where they release the pandemic designation or whatever they call it. I don't know what the official term is for it, but kind of like how they release alleviate mask mandates because they hit certain numbers. It's probably the same thing as it relates to, the pandemic, but I guess we'll just wait and see, as we have with everything else for the last year.
That goes to Candace's lesson, flexibility.
That's right.
Adaptability and flexibility. Sandra, I was just wondering, I wonder too, there is a chance at some point we run into a situation where there's candidates who prefer an environment that does mandate, especially if it's on site. If you're required to be on site, and I want security that my counterparts are vaccinated or testing. I mean, there's the flip side to that as well.
Absolutely. And I've had that question too. I'm vaccinated, I wear my mask, I follow whatever. What does the company do? And how are they enforcing their policies and procedures? Because that's really important to me. So yeah, it's super interesting.
Awesome.
That's all my questions.
Ah,
Yeah,
well, that
that's
wasn't
it.
so bad.
Mm-mm.
Just kidding. I will say that what you were just saying, Sandra, about candidates asking, I'm glad to hear that candidates are asking questions about where they're going and whether it's vaccine related or culture related, whatever the case may be. I think the shift of a balance in, I don't know how else to say it other than a balance in power between the company and candidates that needs to happen. And so people need to be looking for what works for them, not so much whatever company's willing to take them, I think.
Yeah, candidates are definitely in the driver's seat these days, and I think for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so companies need to, be aware of that and not keep doing the same old things that they did before, especially if they're experiencing retention issues or attraction of new employees and candidate issues. Just have to mix it up a little bit. All right, anybody have any parting words going into 2022? Flexibility, adaptability, culture.
Resilience and culture. Yeah.
Mental health.
Yeah, definitely culture.
Yeah.
Mental health. EAP. We
EAP.
happen to have an EAP available.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Robert's not here. Reach out to Robert if you want to know about the EAP. All right. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.